Section 5 of Racketty-Packetty House and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Racketty-Packetty House and Other Stories by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Surly Tim, Part 2. Tim, she'd say, "This is only the school, and we're the scholars, and he's teaching us his way. We munnot be loike the children o' Israel i' the wilderness, and turn away from the cross 'cause of the sarpent. We munnot say, 'There's a snake.' We mun say, 'There's the cross, and the Lord's gi'e it to us.' The teacher wouldn't be o' much use to him if the scholars knew as much as he did, and I allus think it's the best to comfort mysen with saying, 'The Lord Almighty, He knows.' And she allus comforted me, too, when I were worrited. Life looked smooth, somehow, them 3 year. Happen the Lord sent 'em to me to make up for what were comin'. At the end of the first year, the child were born, the little lad here," touching the turf with his hand. "Wee Watty, his mother called him, and he were a fine, lightsome little chap. He filled the whole house with music, day in and day out, crowin' and crowin', and cryin' too sometime. But if ever you're a feather, mister, you'll find out 'at a baby's cries music often enough, and you'll find too, if you ever lose one, 'at you give all you'd getten just to hear even the worst a cryin'. Rosanna, she couldn't find it in her heart to set the little one out of her arms a minute, and she'd go about the room with her eyes all lidded up and her face bloomin' like a slip o' a girl's, and if she laid him i' the cradle her head 'ud be turned o'er her shoulder all the time, lookin' at him and singin' bits o' sweet-soundin' foolish women folks' songs. I thought then 'at them old nursery songs were the happiest music I ever heard, and when Santa sung 'em they minded me o' hymn tunes. Well, mister, before the spring were out, wee Wat was toddling round, holding to his mother's gown, and by the middle o' next year he was cooing like a dove, and prattlin' words a voice like hers. His eyes were big and brown and straightforward like hers, and his mouth was like hers, and his curls were the colour o' a brown bee's back. Happen we set too much store by him, or happen it were only the teacher again teaching us his way, but howsever that were, I came home one sunny morning from the factory, and my dear lass met me at the door, all white and cold, but trying hard to be brave and help me to bear what she had to tell. 'Tim,' said she, 'the Lord has sent us a trouble, but we can bear it together. Canna we, dear lad?' That were all, but I knew what it meant, though the poor little lamb had been well enough when I kissed him last. I went in and saw him lying there on his pillows, struggling and gasping in hard convulsions, and I seed all was over. And in half an hour, just as the sun crept across the room and touched his curls, the pretty little chap opens his eyes all at once. 'Daddy,' he crows out, 'sit he, Daddy,' and he lifts himself up and catches at the floating sunshine, laughs at it, and falls back dead, mister. I've always thought 'at the Lord Almighty knew what he were doing when he give the woman to Adam in the Garden of Eden. He knowed he were not but a poor chap as could not do for his'n, and I suppose that's the reason he give the woman the strength to bear trouble when it comed. I'd a gone clean in if it hadn't been for my lass when the little chap deed. I never tackled out i' all my days that hurt me as heavy as losing him did. I could not bear the sight o' his cradle, and if ever I come across any of his bits of playthings, I'd fall to crying and shaking like a baby. I kept out of the way of the neighbours' children even. I was not like Rosanna. I could not see quite clear what the Lord meant, and I could not help murmuring sad and heavy, 'That's just like us men, mister, just as if the dear wench as had given him her life for food day and neat had nerve for the best read of the two to be weak and heavy-hearted.' But I getten welly over it at last, and we was beginning to come round a bit and look for'ard to the time when we'll see him again, instead of looking back to the time we shut the round bit of a face under the coffin lid. The day come when we could bear to talk about him and mind things he'd said and tried to say i' his broken baby ways. And so we were creeping back again to the old happy quiet, and we had been welly 6 months, when summat fresh come. I'll never forget it, mister, the neat it happened. I'd kissed Rosanna at the door and left her standing there when I went up to the village to buy summat she wanted. It were a bright moonlight neat, just such a neat as this, and the lass had followed me out to see the moonshine. It was so bright and clear, and just before I starts, she folds both her hands on my shoulder and says, soft and thoughtful, "Tim, I wonder if the little chap sees us." "I'd like to know, dear lass," I answers back. And then she speaks again. "Tim, I wonder if he'd know he was ours, if he could see, or if he'd ha' forgot. He was such a little fellow." Them were the last peaceful words I ever heard her speak. I went up to the village and getting what she sent me for, and then I come back. The moon was shining as bright as ever, and the flowers ere a little slip of garden were a sparkling with dew. I seed 'em as I went up the walk, and I thought again of what she'd said about the little lad. She was not outside, and I could not see a leet about the house, but I heard voices, so I walked straight into the entry, into the kitchen, and there she were, mister, my poor wench, crouching down by the table, hiding her face in her hands, and close beside her were a mon i' red soldier clothes. My heart leaped into my throat, and for a minute I had not a word, for I saw summat wid up, though I could not tell what it were. But at last my voice came back. "Good evening, mister," I says to him. "I hope you had not broughten ill news. What ails thee, dear lass?" She stirs a little and gives a moan like a dying child, and then she lifts up her wan, broken-hearted face and stretches out both her hands to me. "Tim," she says, "dunnot hate me, lad, dunnot. I thought he were dead long sin. I thought 'at the Russians killed him and I were free, but I amna. I never were. He never deed, Tim, and there he is, the mon as I were wed to and left by. God forgi'e, and oh God forgi'e me." There, mister, there's a story for thee. What dost thou think o't? My poor lass was not my wife at all. The little chap's mother was not his feyther's wife, and never had been. That there worthless fellow as beat and starved her and left her to fight the world alone had come back alive and well, ready to begin again. He could take her away from me at any hour of the day, and I could not say a word to bar him. The law said my wife, the little dead lad's mother, belonged to him, body and soul. There was no law to help us. It were all on his side. There's no use going o'er all we said to each other in that dark room there. I raved and prayed and pled with the lass to let me carry her across the seas, where I'd heerd there were help for such like. But she pled back a broken, patient way that it would not be reet, and happen it were the Lord's will. She didna say much to the soldier. I scarce heerd her speak to him more than once when she axed him to let her go away by hersen. "Thou canna want me now, Phil," she said. "Thou canna care for me. Thou must know I'm more this mon's wife than thine. But I dunnot ax thee to gie me to him, because I know thou would not be reet. I only ax thee to let me alone. I'll go fur enough off and never see him more." But the villain held to her. If she did not come wi' him, he said, he had her up afore the court for bigamy. I could ha' done murder then, mister, and I would ha' done it, had not been for the lass running in betwixt us and pleading with all her might. If we'd been rich folk, there might ha' been some help for her. At least the law might ha' been brought to make him leave her be. But being poor working folk, there were only one thing. The wife mun go wi' a husband, and there the husband stood, a scoundrel, cursing, with his black heart on his tongue. "Well," says the lass at last, fair wearied out wi' grief, "I'll go with thee, Phil, and I'll do my best to please thee, but I will not promise to forget the mon has been true to me, and has stood betwixt me and the world." And then she turned round to me. "Tim," she said to me, as if she were half feared, I feared o' him and me standing by, 3 hours afore, the law 'ud had let me mill any mon 'at feared her. Tim, she says, surely he would not refuse to let us go together to the little lad's grave for the last time. She did not speak to him, but to me, and she spoke still and strained, as if she were too heart-broke to be wild. Her face was as white as the dead, but she did not cry, as any other woman would have done. Come, Tim, she said, he cannot say no to that. And so out we went, without another word, and left the black-hearted rascal behind, sitting in the very room the little un deed in. His cradle stood there, in the corner. We went out into the moonlight, without speaking, and we did not say a word until we come to this very place, mister. We stood here for a minute silent, and then I sees her begin to shake, and she throws herself down on the grass with her arms flung o'er the grave, and she cries out as if her death wound had been given to her. "Little lad," she says, "little lad, dost thou see thy mother? Canst not thou hear her calling thee? Little lad, get nigh to the throne and plead." I fell down beside the poor crushed wench and sobbed with her. I could not comfort her, for where would there any comfort for us? There were none left. There were no hope. We were shamed and broke down. Our lives was lost, the past were not, the future were worse. Oh, my poor lass, how hard she tried to pray for me, mister, yes, for me, as she lay there with her arms round her dead baby's grave, and her cheek on the grass as grew o'er his breast. "Lord God Almighty," she says, "help us. Dunnot gi' us up. Dunnot, dunnot. We cannot do without thee now, if the time ever were when we could. The little chap must be with thee. I mind the bit of comfort about gathering the lambs i' his bosom. And Lord, if thou couldst spare him a minute, send him down to us with a bit of leet. Oh, Feyther, help the poor lad here, help him. Let the weight fall on me, not on him. Just help the poor lad to bear it. If ever I did aught as were worthy of thy sight, let that be my reward. Dear Lord A'mighty, I be willing to give up a bit of my own heavenly glory for the dear lad's sake." Well, mister, she lay there on the grass, praying and crying, wild but gentle, for nigh half an hour, and then it seemed as she got quiet like, and she got up. Happen the Lord had hearkened and sent the child. Happen he had, for when she gotten up, her face looked to me all white and shining i' the clear moonlight. "Sit down by me, dear lad," she said, "and hold my hand a minute." I sat down and took hold her hand as she bid me. "Tim," she said, "this were why the little chap deed. Dost now thou see now at the Lord knew best?" "Yes, lass," I answers humble, and lays my face on her hand, breaking down again. "Hush, dear lad," she whispers, "we ha' not time for that. I want to talk to thee. Wilt a listen?" "Yes, wife," I says, and I heard her sob when I said it, but she catches hersen up again. "I want thee to make me a promise," said she. "I want thee to promise never to forget what peace we ha' had. I want thee to remember it allus, and to mind him 'at's dead, and let his little hand hold thee back fro' sin and hard thoughts. I pray for thee neet and day, Tim, and thou shalt pray for me, and happen there'll come a leet. But if there dunnot, dear lad, and I do not see how there could, if there dunnot, and we never see each other again, I want thee to make me a promise, that if thou sees the little chap first, thou'lt mind him o' me, and watch out wi' him nigh the gate. And I'll promise thee that if I see him first, I'll mind him o' thee, and watch out true and constant." I promised her, mister, as you can guess, and we kneeled down and kissed the grass, and she took a bit of the sod to put i' her bosom, and then we stood up and looked at each other, and at last she put her dear face on my breast and kissed me as she had done every neet sin we were mon and wife. "Good-bye, dear lad," she whispers, her voice all broken. "Don't come back to the house till I'm gone. Good-bye, dear, dear lad, and God bless thee." And she slipped out of my arms and were gone in a moment, almost before I could cry out. There is not much more to tell, mister. The end's coming now, and happen it'll shorten off the story, so it seems sudden to thee, but it were not sudden to me. I lived alone here, and worked, and minded my own business, and answered no questions for nigh about a year, hearing nowt and seeing nowt and hoping nowt, until one time, when the daisies were blowing on the little grave here, there come to me a letter from Manchester, from one of the medical chaps at the hospital. It were a short letter, with print on it, and the moment I seed it I knowed summat were up, and I opened it trembling. Mister, there were a woman lying in one of the wards, dying of some long-named heart disease, and she prayed him to send for me, and one of the young soft-hearted ones had writ me a line to let me know. I started almost before I finished reading the letter, and when I get into the place I fun just what I knowed I should. I fun her my wife, the blessed lass, and if it had been an hour later I would not ha' seen her alive, for she were nigh past knowing me then. But I knelt down by the bedside, and I plead wer as she lay there, until I brought her back to the world again for one moment. Her eyes flew wide open all at once, and she seed me and smiled, her dear face quivering to death. "Dear lad," she whispered, "the path was not so long after all. The Lord knew. He trod it his'n once, you know. I knowed that come. I prayed so. I've reached the very end now, Tim, and I shall see the little lad first. But I winna forget my promise. No, I'll look out for thee, at the gate." And her eyes shut slow and quiet, and I knowed she was dead. There, Mr. Doncaster, there it all is, for there she lies under the daisies, close by her child, for I brought her here and buried her. The fellow has come betwixt us, and tortured her for a while, and then left her again, I found out, and she was so afeard of doing some harm that she would not come nigh me. It were heart disease as killed her, the medical chap said, but I knowed better. It were heartbreak, that's all. Sometimes I think o'er it till I canna stand it any longer, and then I'm fain to come here and lay my hand on the grass. And sometimes I ha' queer dreams about her. I had one last neet. I thought as she'd come to me all at once, just as she used to look, only wi' her white face shining like a star, and she says, "Tim, the path isna so long after all. Tha's come nigh to the end, and me and the little chap is waiting. He knows thee, dear lad, for I've taught him. That's why I come here to neet, mister, and I believe that's why I've talked so free to thee. If I'm near the end, I'd like some one to know. I ha' meant no hurt when I seemed grum and surly. It werena ill will, but a heavy heart." He stopped there, and his head drooped upon his hands again, and for a minute or so there was another dead silence. Such a story as this needed no comment. I could make none. It seemed to me that the poor fellow's sore heart could bear none. At length he rose from the turf and stood up, looking out over the graves into the soft light beyond with a strange, wistful sadness. "Well, I mun go now," he said slowly. "Good neet, mister, good neet, and thank you for listening." "Good night," I returned, adding, in an impulse of pity that was almost a passion, "and God help you." "Thank you again, mister," he said, and then turned away, and as I sat pondering I watched his heavy drooping figure threading its way among the dark mounds and white marble, and under the shadowy trees, and out into the path beyond. I did not sleep well that night. The strained, heavy tones of the man's voice were in my ears, and the homely yet tragic story seemed to weave itself into all my thoughts and keep me from rest. I could not get it out of my mind. In consequence of this sleeplessness, I was later than usual in going down to the factory, and when I arrived at the gates I found an unusual bustle there. Something out of the ordinary routine had plainly occurred, for the whole place was in confusion. There was a crowd of hands grouped around one corner of the yard, and as I came in, a man ran against me and showed me a terribly pale face. "I ax pardon, Mr. Doncaster," he said in a wild hurry, "but there's an accident happened. One of the weavers is hurt bad, and I'm going for the doctor. The loom caught and crushed him afore we could stop it." For some reason or other, my heart misgave me that very moment. I pushed forward to the group in the yard corner, and made my way through it. A man was lying on a pile of coats in the middle of the bystanders, a poor fellow, crushed and torn and bruised, but lying quite quiet now, only for an occasional little moan that was scarcely more than a quick gasp for breath. It was Surly Tim. "He's nigh the end of it now," said one of the hands pityingly. "He's nigh the last now, poor chap. What's that he's saying, lads?" For all at once some flickering sense seemed to have caught at one of the speaker's words, and the wounded man stirred, murmuring faintly, but not to the watchers. Ah, no, to something far, far beyond their feeble human sight, to something in the broad without. "The end," he said. "Ay, this is the end, dear lass. And the path's all shining or summat, and why, lass, I can see thee plain, and the little chap too." Another flutter of the breath, one slight movement of the mangled hand, and I bent down closer to the poor fellow, closer because my eyes were so dimmed that I could not see. "Lads," I said aloud a few seconds later, "you can do no more for him. His pain is over." For with a sudden glow of light which shone upon the shortened path and the waiting figures of his child and its mother, Surly Tim's earthly trouble had ended. End of section 5.